Okay, we are here at the RPC 2010 in Cologne. Next to me sits Joe Delver, author of Lone Wolf. Hi.
Hi.
Would you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Okay, well, my name's Joe Dever, author of Einsamer Wolf, as it's known here in Germany. I'm sure there are a lot of devoted fantasy fans that will have heard of Einsamer Wolf, and many that would have got into the hobby through reading my books in the 80s. This is my first major German show that I've attended, and I'm absolutely delighted with the response I've had. It's been a great show so far. Thank you.
That's very nice to hear. Why did you start writing adventure books? What is so fascinating about them?
Well, the way Einsamer Wolf came into being was that it was based on my Dungeons & Dragons campaign. I started work on the world of Magnamund, in which Einsamer Wolf is set, back in 1976, probably long before most of you were born. But the first Einsamer Wolf book came out in 1984, so it was really 7 or 8 years before it was published as a solo game system. What made me produce it as a solo game system was simply the realization that nobody had done that before. And I thought it would be a great idea if you could take the part of the character of the story, but not just play that character in one book, carry it over in a true role-playing sense throughout an entire series of books, develop the character, explore and discover a whole new world. And because I had done so much work already on creating the history and the backstory to Magnamund, frankly, I didn't have to make it up as I went along. I had a whole developed world to set the adventure in, and quite the reverse. I could hold things back from the reader. I could make them guess to what was going on. I put little acorns, I used to call them, that would grow into trees later on in the story. And I think the readers particularly appreciated that. They had a feeling that they were in a very deep, well-developed world, and they really wanted to discover more about it. So, it was an exciting adventure, but it had depth.
What do you think is your favorite adventure in the whole series?
From the point of view of writing it, or happy with the... Okay. The one I enjoyed writing the most was probably Book 5. Now, I think it was called Book of the Mantikore here in Germany. It was called Shadow on the Sand in the original English edition. And it's a 2-part adventure. What is really different about this particular adventure is that you're given a mission when you start, as you are in most of the books, and then suddenly the mission changes. When you arrive at your destination, there is a large ambush waiting for you, and suddenly the whole objective changes. And it really sort of unnerves the reader, thinking, I'm here to do a specific thing, and suddenly the whole rules of the game have changed. Readers really enjoyed that. Plus, you're in the middle of a massive plot that is really against you. And so suddenly, for the first time, the readers appreciate how important they are as a person within this world, and how many of the big baddies are after you all at the same time. So it was a great way to end Book 5. Because Book 5 ends with a major advance for the reader. The reader becomes a Kai Master at the end of Book 5, and then develops some very powerful skills to carry on into the next 7 books. So it was a major transition. I just had a lot of fun writing it, because it just worked out fantastically well. And it was very odd. I wrote it in the middle of a very bad winter in England. I mean, you get some bad winters here in Germany, so if you imagine a very bad winter, snow, cold, -15, freezing cold. And I'm writing about an Arabian setting, where it's 40 degrees. It seemed very bizarre. But the place where I was writing it had a sauna, and I ended up most of the days in the sauna writing the adventure, just to get a feel for how hot and oppressive this place was. It was very strange, but it was a great experience to do it, and I thoroughly enjoyed writing that story. So a lot of people particularly like that as well, so I think they got the sense of fun I had when I was creating it. Yeah, amazing.
On the opposite side, what do you think was the greatest mistake you ever made in the Lone Wolf series?
Thank you for bringing this up. I do appreciate this. There is one classic mistake, and it's in Book 17, and it's a thing called Shamath's Riddle, okay? And I hold my hands up and say, mea culpa, I got it wrong. I calculated it incorrectly, and for 20 years people have been chasing and bringing this up and mentioning it, that it doesn't actually work, and whatever number you choose, you end up with the same result as the number you choose. And I thought I was being very clever, and I'd kind of worked out the puzzle, and the answer is 10. But it can be any number you start with, so it's quite confusing. But I really think I've paid, I've paid the price for this. I've had hundreds of letters and lots of people pointing this out. Now, the good news is that with the introduction and the publishing of the new collector editions, I get the opportunity to correct that error. So at last, 20 years after it was created, I can at least put it right in the collector editions, in the hardback collector editions. So there you have it. That's my biggest mistake.
Finally. How did you come up with the 10 kite disciplines?
Okay. Now the whole idea for the Kai Lords came out of the role-playing sessions that I hosted back in the late 70s. Now the late 70s was really early days for role-playing. You know, I got into role-playing through using Gary Gygax's rules called Chainmail, which are a set of tabletop wargaming rules for the medieval period. So I knew Gygax and Arneson's work from that angle. And then I managed to get hold of the very first 3-pamphlet edition of Dungeons & Dragons when I was working in the States in the late 70s. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This is perfect. Because I had medieval armies for tabletop gaming, but I wanted to introduce magic and a bit of imagination. You know, because I come from an English tradition of fantasy authorship. You know, I've read Moorcock, I read Mervyn Peake, I've read everything Tolkien had written, you know, priming myself for this moment. And then suddenly, Gygax and Arneson hand me the toolkit I needed to actually create my world and, you know, make it live and breathe with a fantasy flavour. So I started using those rules in very early days for my small group of role-playing friends, and I decided from an early point of view that I didn't want to borrow anything from any other writer. I wanted to create everything originally. New creatures, new settings, new history, everything as original as I could possibly make it. And in the process of doing that, obviously, with Dungeons & Dragons, I needed to create new character classes, having decided to make that choice and go wholly original. And the Kai Lords came out of a need for a sort of... what I had in mind was a psionic ranger. I wanted rangers that had mental powers. But then it got deeper than that. I had to give them a history. Why were they there? What was their function? What was their purpose? And I particularly liked the idea of them being... they're agents of good, but they're unfinished. Okay? It's almost as if the good god has rushed them out quickly to counter this evil threat, and they're not ready. Okay, they're not ready to leave the factory. Okay, so they had all these skills in them, but they weren't realised and fully perfected, which is from a writer's point of view is fantastic because it gives the opportunity for those characters to develop them themselves. And I thought this is a perfect character class for role playing. Okay, because it's very easy now to to gain skills at different levels. So they were the obvious choice from my point of view as the basis for the character when I did the solo adventures in '84. And it was a natural. It was, I knew it had to be Kai Lords. They were just perfect for the role. And as it proved, they've been a huge success with the readers. They very much identify with them. My readers were typically 13 to 15-year-old male. They were 80% boys, 20% girls. And all the way across the world, everybody recognized and identified with this last of the kind. Wasn't particularly bright in class, wasn't a particularly good student, and they kind of identified with the fact that he wasn't perfect, but thrust into a very unusual, very exceptional situation and developed himself and sort of became a hero through having to. That's how the Kai Lords came about. That's how I developed that character class. And then the others followed from it, really, how they helped or hindered, how they were enemies or friends. And the other classes I developed really from developing the country and the world and imagining what sort of heroes and villains would populate those areas.